want to welcome you here to the 43rd Annual Geneva Spring Lecture. We are very pleased to be joined with our partners here at Trinity Episcopal Church and excited with our work here with them as well. We are also partnering with the Lutheran Synod Peace Not Walls organization and with Bright Stars of Bethlehem. And we are about cooperation, and this is a wonderful expression of that. The issue we are dealing with, though, is one that lacks a great deal of cooperation. It is conflict. We know that in Israel today there are many competing forces and perspectives. Some see the present conflict but don't understand its background and its history and all the things that have led up to today. Some hear the uprisings and take sides, but really don't know all the underlying issues. Israel comes to our attention when there's a major problem, but we often don't hear about the day-to-day situation. We all know that there are a multitude of issues: racial, national, economic, political factors all at work. And of course, there are the faith traditions involved. At least 4 major faith traditions meet in Israel. Now, you might already be thinking 4, at least. But of course, the Jewish, the Christian, and the Muslim, but also a great deal of secularism, which itself is a religious force in our world, and they all meet in Israel. We could list far many more issues and aspects. The U.S. has played a major role in the past 70 years. Every U.S. president in my lifetime has had the goal of finding the solution. There have been treaties and there have been peace agreements, but most have failed. Some of the approach today, especially in the U.S., has been driven by rather poor theology and theological traditions and difficult political positions that at times increase the problems. We hear from politicians, but seldom from people involved. Today we have that great privilege to hear from a person who has lived the story, still experiences and explores it from many perspectives. Dr. Mitri Raheb, I said it wrong, I knew I was going to. Dr. Mitri Raheb is a Palestinian, a Christian leader, a scholar, an educational leader, a social activist, and a pastor. In his book, Faith in the Face of Empire, which if you are interested after the lecture, there are copies available on the back that you may purchase. The book explores his story, the story of his people, the story of his land and nation in the light of the biblical story. The land has almost always been in the midst of the conflict of empires and still is today. Dr. Raheb's book shows us how the biblical story and people today continue to call out for liberation, for freedom. But that call is based in difficult questions. Questions of where is God in this? Questions of what is God doing? Questions of for whom is God is at work? What has Jesus the Messiah brought to life that makes any difference? How is the Spirit leading us to live and to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven? How do we live with faith, hope, and love through imaginative, creative resistance? I found that phrase a wonderful phrase in this book. Imaginative, creative resistance. And so we welcome Dr. Mitri Raheb to help us hear the story from a multitude of perspectives, but most of all, his personal life and perspective, to see more of the issues, and to learn to follow a tough calling of growing hope in times of crisis. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor, for this introduction, and thank you all for coming this afternoon here, and I'm glad to see so many friends. Some of them came like 4-hour drive, 5-hour drive from many different corners, so I feel really privileged to see all of you, old as well as hopefully new friends. I guess when a friend of mine, a pastor, wrote me a few months ago, said, we would like to have you come to Iowa. I said, great. Iowa was my first trip ever to the US, was to Iowa back in '91. And you know, it's like the first love, you know. But then I said, when? And she said, in February. I said, I'm not sure really that I would like to come in February to Iowa. Can't we do it in summer or so? But I have to say, I mean, what a great day. The sun is shining, and a better day we could not have asked for it. Especially that, you know, I was very worried because I have to catch the plane tonight in O'Hare, and if there was like a snowstorm or something, I would have been stuck, and I need to be in Vienna tomorrow for a major global religious summit. So in that sense, I think everything worked really well, and I'm really glad to be among you today to talk about a tough calling, growing hope at times of crisis. And those, maybe just let me, as an introduction, I'm not sure if everyone knows a bit about my background. Palestinian, Arab, Christian, and on top of that, even a Lutheran pastor. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but it's not, because remember, this is where Christianity started. I was born in Bethlehem. I know it sounds biblical, but this is how it is. And I'm talking about Bethlehem, Palestine, not Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, just to be clear. And I always like to make the point that the Bible did not originate in the Bible Belt. Thanks God, I mean, right? But it originated from Palestine. This is where the whole story started. And so it's exactly with this background that I come to tackle this topic, a tough calling. Now, as a pastor, I know that actually every pastoral calling is tough. I know we have here many pastors, and I'm sure they can agree with me. I mean, it's really not an easy thing to be a pastor. I saw many colleagues having burnout. I saw several colleagues quitting their job. And so pastoring at large is tough, but pastoring in that part of the world is even tougher. And I share with you something about, my calling. I served for the last 30 years as senior pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. And so some of what I will share with you is really built on that. And really it's tough to be pastoring in that context because, I was 5 years old when Israel occupied Bethlehem. The first memories I have from my childhood actually are the memories of the Israeli tanks rolling into our narrow street, next to the Church of the Nativity. These were the first memories I have as a child. And I'm now 55 years old, and within this time, this period, we went through 10 wars, which really means, in average, every 5 years, we have a war or a semi-war going on. The last was the war on Gaza back in 2014, so 3.5 years ago. So imagine, what does it mean really to live in a context of continuous wars? I mean, people try really, to build a living, to build a business, and then they get interrupted. And then they need, to gather their strength again and to try to start over and over again. But how many times in life can you start over? That's a tough calling. But also being a Palestinian Arab is not easy because, with all the stereotypes about Arabs and about Muslims and about Palestinians, you always feel that, you have to prove that you are kosher, while other people don't need to prove that all the time. So you're always, under that, almost like in a test. And being a Palestinian Christian itself, it's tough in itself because, for you here, you read the Bible and it's all good news, God promising his people a piece of land, and that piece of land is not Iowa. And they will not chase you out in the name of the Bible. But in our part of the world, it's as, the good news is that our land is taken away from us, given to colonizers in the name of God, and we need to be happy that God is doing that. That's tough calling. I think if we had, if the Soviets were our occupiers, it would have been much, much easier. We could have even President Trump on our side. I'm not sure about him, but but it's really tough calling when you live in a context, especially like now when, you look through the tunnel and you don't, not only that you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you don't see even the tunnel itself. Tough calling. So this is really the context I come from as a background, just to know what I'm talking about. And this is why I think hope is not always something that, wow, everything is so bright. Sometimes hope expresses itself in lamentations. I was preaching about it this morning, where are you, God? We heard it from the pastor in the introduction. Why are you so silent? Why are you doing anything about it? I mean, how many churches have been praying for peace in the Holy Land, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, and we are further from peace like never before. And so we ask the question, God, where are you? Why aren't you hearing all of these prayers? But as I said, hope sometimes expresses itself as lamentation. And why is lamentation hope? Because it means we are not giving up on God. We are not giving up on God. We try all the time to challenge him to act, to come, to save, to bring peace. And so lamentations can be actually a sign of hope. how long, O Lord? And this question is a question that, we have to deal with all the time. It was 100 years ago, 1917, when Lord Balfour had his declaration. I always like to make, the point that it wasn't Lord God that promised the state of Israel the land. It was the Lord Balfour. Big difference between the Lord God and the Lord Balfour. Lord Balfour is the empire of that time, the British Empire. The Lord God came always to rescue those who are oppressed. Two different stories. But so it's 100 years, and we keep saying, how long, O Lord, 70 years ago, 77% of Palestine was lost. And over 700,000 people of our people were kicked out, including many Palestinian Christians. And so we say, how long, O Lord, these refugees will be still scattered all over the world? How long? But it's also 50 years ago that Israel occupied Bethlehem, and this occupation seems not to end, So we say, how long, O Lord? So, lamentation can be a sign of hope because we are not giving up on God. Otherwise, we will stop saying, how long, O Lord, once we give up on God. But we have not given up on God. And so, let me come to the topic, how to grow hope at times of crisis. I just explained to you the context and the crisis. So how to grow hope? I wish I could give you a recipe and you take it with you home and, you can do it. Unfortunately, there are no recipes for hope. I cannot tell you do this or do that and this is how it is. Because I feel hope is grace. When you can hope at times of crisis, when you can hope against all odds, when you can hope against hope, then it's really not you, it's grace at work. And this is how I see it. The whole ministry, our DNA is really about hope, but it's not something that we invented or we were able to do. I feel that was actually a privilege that God gave us. Hope is grace. So let me share with you something about how to grow hope in times of crisis. And let me start by saying what hope is not. It's always easy when we can exclude few things. Because I think many people, they mean with hope something that has nothing to do with hope. So what hope is not? Hope is not optimism. There is a big difference between optimism and hope. Optimism has to do with optic. So you look and you see it looks like it's going to be better. That's optimism. But this has nothing to do with hope, because if you are optimistic, you don't need hope. If you are optimistic, why hope? And no need especially for Christian hope. So hope has nothing to do with just relax, it's going to be better. That's not hope. Hope is not, let's hope for tomorrow. Maybe something will happen. That's not hope. That's optimism. I guess hope maybe was, I call this cheap hope, because it's really not hope, it's optimism. When you analyze the situation in Israel-Palestine, you cannot be optimistic. I mean, with the Israeli settlements, colonies growing everywhere in the West Bank, taking all of our land. How can you be optimistic? You know, seeing a one-sided US policy towards Israel-Palestine. I mean, how can you be optimistic? You know, looking at the future, how the land is being, the environment, you know, damaged, you know, you really cannot be optimistic. So, I mean, unless you are crazy, you really cannot be optimistic. But this is why I always say hope is not optimism. Because hope maybe was best characterized once by Martin Luther, if I may quote Martin Luther in this Episcopal church. You know, he said once, even if I knew that the world is coming to an end tomorrow, so even if things look, you know, so dark that it seems that there is no future, he said, even if I knew that the world is coming to an end tomorrow, he said, I will go out today into the garden, not tomorrow, tomorrow it's too late. I will go out today into the garden and plant olive trees. As a good German, he spoke about the apple tree, because this is what works well in Germany, but in Palestine we talked about the apple trees. So that's hope, actually. It's looking, analyzing the situation, you know, really understanding what's going on, understanding the mind of the colonizer, seeing what really Israel is after, seeing, you know, that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and yet going out today into the garden, into the society, and making a difference. That's hope. That's hope against hope. Second, hope has nothing to do with waiting. So hope is not waiting. You know, I had a church member at Christmas Lutheran Church. He died a few years ago. You know, and he was the most optimistic person I ever saw. I mean, you know, he lived through so many wars, but he was always listening to the news. And when, you know, say King Hussein was meeting with someone, he would say, you know, let's wait and see what will come out of that meeting. Maybe they will solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you know. And when Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State, was coming, you know, to Israel-Palestine, he will say, oh, let's see, you know, Condoleezza Rice is coming. Maybe, you know, she will fix the problem, you know. And then, not sure what, the German Chancellor will come and meet with Arafat, and, you know, he will said, wow, you know, let's wait. It seems, it looks positive, you know. Maybe they come out with something. So he was always, you know, waiting for something to happen. It's almost like waiting for the Messiah. But it's not only him. I have two American friends. One of them is a devout Republican. I mean, really, really, really Republican. And when George W. Bush was up for election the second time, he told me, you know what, if George W. Bush will be re-elected, he will make peace in the Holy Land. He was convinced that George W. Bush is the Messiah who's going to come and fix our situation. And I had another friend who was a devout Democrat, really Democrat. And he was of the opinion that if President Obama will be re-elected, he will be able to fix it. He was so sure that President Obama is serious. And I remember, you know, sitting with them over a glass of wine in the evening and discussing these things. And I remember telling each one of them, you know what? I'm not waiting anymore for the Messiah. And you know why? Why? Because our Messiah came 2,000 years ago. And we know it for a fact because he came to our land. So why wait for another? Obama, Bush, Arafat, you name it, are all politicians. They are after our votes or after whatever, our money or whatever, but they are not the one who are going to fix the problem. So hope has nothing to do with waiting for that Messiah, because we believe that our Messiah came 2,000 years ago. He said what needed to be said. He did what needed to be done, and the ball is in our court. Either we do it or we leave it. Which really means, and our tagline as Bright Stars of Bethlehem is called, hope is what we do. Hope is what we do. It's not what we see. It's not what we're waiting for, but hope is what we do. We are the hope of this world, or there is no hope for this world. And the third point, hope is not something to come in the life after. You know, I meet sometimes with many people and they tell me, you know, this world is so hopeless, so thanks God we will have it better in the life after. That might be true, but that's not enough. You know, when I meet with young people in Palestine and I talk to them, many of them have no problem to believe that there is life after death. Most of them believe that something will come after life. You know what their problem is? They cannot believe that there is life before death that is worth living. This is very dangerous. When people put their hope only in the life after, and they cannot see any more hope in the life before death. So hope for me cannot be just once it's over, it will start somewhere else. But hope has to be something for this life. So, you know, because Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. And he was not talking about life after when he said that. He was talking about here and now. Remember, he was saying that in Palestine, when Palestine was under Roman occupation. So hope cannot be something that just for the life to come. It has to start here. So hope is not what we see, not optimism. Hope is not for the life after, and hope is not waiting. So what is hope? We said what hope is not, but what is hope? Again, I have 3 points. Lutherans usually, they like these three points. So hope is resistance. And when I look at the Bible, I see that the Bible is a book of hope infused with resistance. This is how I read it. It's hope infused of resistance. I mean, if you look at, for example, the book of Revelation, it's a book of resistance against the Roman Empire, but it's infused with hope. But even if you look at Genesis 1, written in exile, under Babylonian rule, it's again infused with this hope that everything, and God looked and everything was good. And yet it's resisting that imperial theology that it's the stars who control people's life. So the whole Bible, really from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22, is a book, it's an infusion of hope and resistance. And our forefathers and foremothers in the Bible, they kept resisting. The whole Bible is, all chapters for me, they have to do with resistance. They kept resisting. Why they kept resisting? Because they never gave up hope. Once you stop resisting, then you have surrendered to hopelessness. Once you stop resisting, it's over. And this is why our forefathers and foremothers, they kept resisting, because they kept hoping. Because hope and resistance, they go hand in hand. The moment we stop resisting, it means we have given up hope. And so the preaching, if you look at the preaching about the preaching of Jesus about the kingdom, this was resistance, because the kingdom was a concept to resist the empire. But it was also hope that there is something bigger than the empire, even bigger than the Roman Empire. Imagine, those people in Palestine, who have nothing, they live in this corridor of history. And Jesus was telling them, you know what? There is something bigger than the Roman Empire. It's the kingdom of God. And guess what? You are the ambassadors of this kingdom. That's resistance infused with hope. So, as long as there will be occupation, there will always be resistance. This is what the whole story actually, the biblical story is all about. This is the story of the Jewish people under all the recurring empires that they kept resisting. And suddenly they don't want us to resist when they become part of the empire. Right? But the Jewish story is all about that continuous resistance. You can name it, First revolt, second revolt, which is funny because we have first intifada, second intifada, same thing. Because it's part of the same story. Wherever there is occupation, there will be resistance. So the question is not to resist or not. The question is how to resist. I think the pastor pointed to that before when he talked about imaginative, creative resistance. That's what we are interested in. Because, the empire, the occupier, they would always like to push us to the wall and to bring us to despair. You have no chance. We are much more powerful. We have the latest equipment. We are the 7th largest, military arsenal in the world. We have the best connection to the White House and to Congress. If we want, we can even humiliate, the president of the US in Congress with 26 standing ovations. We are very powerful. So they will always want to bring us to despair. But resistance, creative resistance, is about hope. Because hope and resistance go hand in hand. I remember 2002 when Israel invaded Bethlehem, and you remember that story with the standoff at the Church of the Nativity, and we are just 2 blocks away, and so we were under curfew 24/7. Israeli soldiers came to our compound. They occupied it for 3 days. Israeli tanks were stationed just outside of our home. And they were very scary moments. What we built a conference and a cultural center over 5 years, and part of it was destroyed in 11 hours. And I got sick because I think with all of that, and nobody was able to come. We were not able to leave the house. No one was supposed to visit us. And the first person to be allowed to come into our neighborhood and to talk to us was the CNN correspondent in Israel at that time. His name is Ben Wiedemann. And Ben came to our home. The staircase to our home was blown away with the Israeli tanks. And he came. I was sick. I had pneumonia, and was in my pajamas sitting there, and he interviewed me and said, you know, Pastor, don't you get angry. I mean, you see what you have built so hard in 5 years was destroyed in a few hours. Don't you give up hope. I said, you know, I mean, even as pastors, we are at the end of the day human beings. We get angry, we get depressed, we get despair. But I told him, you know what? Every time we got angry, we start a new project. He said, now I know you must be a very angry person with all the projects you are doing, you know. But that's creative resistance, you know. Not allowing the empire to push you to the wall, to bring you to despair, to push you to give up hope, because hope and resistance go hand in hand. The second point, what hope is investing at a time when no one wants to invest. That's hope. And maybe the best example in the Bible is the prophet Jeremiah. Maybe you know the story of the prophet Jeremiah. He lived around the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. He was put to prison. The temple was destroyed. Jerusalem was occupied. The best people were pushed into exile. And here is Jeremiah sitting in the prison. Everything was lost. And you would think, so what's next? And Jeremiah sends after one of his relatives and told him, I would like you to go and to buy me a piece of land in Jerusalem. Crazy. I mean, you know, who would like to invest in Jerusalem when Jerusalem is destroyed, when the temple is burned down, when the empire is just sitting there? Who is this crazy person to invest at times like this? But this is exactly what hope is. Hope is investing at times when no one is ready to invest. That's hope. You know, in 2003, when Israel started building the wall around Bethlehem, and Bethlehem now has a wall from 3 sides, life in Bethlehem became very desperate. A city cannot grow. We cannot start new neighborhood. It will be overcrowded, high unemployment. So who would like to invest in a context like this? We said we will invest. And so in 2006, we opened the first university college in the whole of Palestine that focus on arts and culture. We don't teach theology. We teach some theological courses, but it's not a seminary, and it's not politics, but it's really, it's art and film and music and theater and dance and design, everything that speaks about life. And people, when they heard me saying, we're going to build this university, they said at times of like this, are you crazy? I said, you know, a crazy world like ours need crazy people like us. Because imagine if we would leave the world to the many crazy people that are out there. We just cannot give up on our land. We cannot give up on our community. And hope is to invest at times when no one else would like to invest. And we started 2006 with 18 students. We have now around 500 students. And these are some of the most creative people in Palestine. That's the creative, future creative leaders for Palestine are there. So hope is investing when no one else is ready to invest. But the third point I would like to say is that hope is always action, never reaction. Hope is always action, never reaction. Because again, the empire wants us to react. You know, they use state terror because they want us to resort to violence. And then we became the terrorists and they became the nice people. The Romans tried that. All empires tried that, you know. In the UN, they say it use of excessive force, but actually it's state terror. So they want us to take arms. They want us to react. Hope has nothing to do with reaction. Hope is action. You know, I can say it that from my own experience, you know, there isn't 1 week that I don't get an attack. You know, it could be in the newspaper, it could be on the internet, you name it. You know, many, even, you know, evangelical pastors, they were sending me life threats because I'm questioning, you know, that promise that they talk about. And in fact, coming to this lecture, the friend who invited me here, she called me and said, you know, there is this, somebody passed on to me an email written against you. And so how should we respond? I said, you know, hope has nothing to do with reaction. Let them write whatever they like. We stick to our goal. We will not allow anyone to derail us. Because, you know, they want us to go into that small fight here and to that small fight here. What we do is we keep telling our story and let them react. We will not react to what they are saying. And, you know, sometimes you feel, you know, I mean, yesterday somebody sent me an email, very nasty article written against me, very, very nasty one by supposedly a Lutheran professor in the US. You know, I read it. It's very painful to read, you know, all the bad things that he writes against me. And this is professor supposed to be, you know. But, you know, after a while, I said, you know, this is great because what this professor is saying, you know, is that we are successful. Otherwise, they will not attack us, you know. They are afraid that we started to crack their software, to crack this Christian Zionist software. You know, that prosperity gospel, you know, that gospel infused with arm race. We are cracking that and say, that is not God. This is not the God that we came to know in the Hebrew Bible or in Jesus Christ. So we will not react because they want us to go there. But no, we keep acting. So 3 points what hope is not, 3 points what hope is. Now 3 other points. How to grow hope. And for me, to grow hope, 3 things are important, and the 3 things has to do with looking for the signs of hope. Looking for the signs of hope that are there. You know, sometimes, you know, it's still winter, everything is cold, everything is barren, and you look between 2 stones and you see a very small plant, green plant, coming, promising spring. That's the sign of hope. And we have to keep looking for these signs of hope in our world that are telling us that spring is coming. And I would like to share from my experience 3 areas where I see signs of hope. As I said, as pastors, we are human beings. Sometimes, it's too much. And when I feel it's too much, I go there where I know there is hope and where I can see these signs of hope. And do you know where I found them? In our students. I go to our university to meet with our students, to see some of the films they are producing, infused with hope. To listen to their critical thinking, to see how they are tackling some tough issues that are maybe taboo in the Palestinian society, but they would like to express it through their art. Whenever I feel sometimes down, I go to look at the paintings that our students are doing, so colorful and infused with hope. And when I meet them, I see these are the signs of hope. These are the future leaders for Palestine. They will be able to do the job. They give me hope. Last September, the board of Bright Stars of Bethlehem came to visit us. And I said, we always meet in the college. Let's now go and visit some of our students in their homes. And we chose one student. Her name is Haneen. She comes from a very small remote village east of Bethlehem. It's one of few villages in Palestine that still has no electricity. We don't have many of those. And why they don't have electricity? Because it's surrounded by Israeli settlements, and the Israeli settlements don't want to have the wiring for the electricity come through the settlement. Basically, they want to chase them out of there to take their land. And so a Jewish Dutch organization gave this village solar panel so that they can power the village. And that was great. Suddenly they had electricity, and they had it for 6 months. Because then the Israeli military came one night and took all the solar panel. The village was back in dark. And we went there while there were no solar panels. They were gone. And we met Haneen. Haneen is a first-generation student, the first of her family to go to university. And she decided to study contemporary art and doing well. And she took us to her village, and we were able to see the transformation that Haneen was doing to that village, gathering the kids of that community and giving them art classes, empowering the women of that community to tell their story very creatively. Even now, these women went all the way to the Israeli High Court and were able to get the solar panel back. When I look at Haneen, these are the signs of hope that we need all the time to look for. But the second point, we have to look to the signs of hope sometimes by looking at history longue durée. Sometimes when you are sitting there in the middle of the problem, you cannot see over the edge of the that's now German, over the edge of the plate, they say in German. You are just overwhelmed with all of these problems. But it's really, for me, it was important to start looking at history longue durée. And let me tell you that. Again, my first ever visit to the US was to Iowa, 1991. I was invited to speak at Wartburg College. and give a lecture there. And I mean, I toured a bit around, and I was shocked that most of the people, the overwhelming majority I met at that visit, had no clue where Palestine is, didn't know anything about the Palestinians, knew nothing that there are Christians there, nothing. You can be very depressed. Now, 27 years later, when I tour the US, most of the churches know much more about Palestine, have some connection somehow to Palestinian Christians or to Palestinians in general. And suddenly, I mean, imagine that the Presbyterian Church, United Church of Christ, took resolutions to divest from companies that profit from the occupation. Where were we 91? If you would have told me 91 that the UCC, the Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church, the Methodist Church will dare to do something like that, most probably I would have laughed like Sarah when she was told she's getting pregnant with 90. But once you start looking at history longue durée, you start seeing change. The landscape is changing. Even if President Trump is going into the other direction, the masses are moving in a different, and it's not only by churches, by the way. 1991, when I was here, there was only AIPAC, the American Israel lobby, who's always, more Roman than the Romans themselves. Always defending whatever Israel does. 15 years ago, some Jewish American felt this cannot be our sole representation. So they started something called J Street. They were American Jews calling for a two-state solution. But that was not enough. Maybe 5-6 years ago, came a new group of Jewish Americans called Jewish Voices for Peace. And they said, as Jewish people, we have to fight for justice and for the justice of the Palestinians in the first place. We cannot be for social justice in this country if we are not for political justice in our country. And it's not only Jewish Voices for Peace. There are so many Jewish groups today that they are totally against the Israeli government and their policies. This is a sign of hope. From 91 till today, the Jewish American landscape is changing tremendously. If we don't see, we cannot grow hope. We need to see it, and we need to support these groups, all of these groups, because these are the signs of hope. They keep us going. They keep us knowing that justice is coming, that peace is coming, that hope is coming. And the third thing to grow hope is we need to learn to celebrate the new victories, the small victories, irrespective how small they are. Because sometimes you are overwhelmed, with all of these big news. Just yesterday, just hearing that, President Trump saying he's going now to move the embassy in May this year to Jerusalem. And he chose a date that is called in our history the Nakba, the catastrophe. This is when we lost 77% of our land. This is when 45% of the Christian community were kicked out of their homes. He chose that date, to move the embassy to Jerusalem. What a humiliation, And so sometimes you feel despair and you say, But we have to look for the small signs of hope, the small victories. And this morning was another small victory that we need to celebrate. This morning, the heads of the churches at the Holy Sepulchre, Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholics, Armenian, made a press conference and they declared that they're going to close the gates of the Holy Sepulchre. Why? Because Israel is debating a law. They want to tax churches, not only for their property, but even hospitals need to pay taxes, schools need to pay taxes, and basically churches will be obliged to pay $213 million every year just in Jerusalem for the state of Israel. No way churches can get all of this money, and basically this will lead to the closure of everything. Some of you know Augusta Victoria Hospital, the largest hospital in Jerusalem, will be closed. They cannot pay the taxes. The schools there, the hostels, the guest houses, everything will be closed if this tax law will go through. I tell you, when I look at the church hierarchy in Jerusalem, I'm always depressed. Because they were all the time so soft. They didn't want to speak about the occupation, They always wanted to please, the state of Israel. And suddenly, they decide to close the gates for the Holy Sepulchre. Never ever thought that they will do something like that. Maybe because it went into their pocket and they were threatened by that they started speaking up. But this is a sign of hope. Because until recently, some of the heads of churches were saying, occupation, never mind. Now they know it's not never mind. Because there will be no churches if this will continue. And so they had to speak up. So this was a sign of hope for me this morning. So we have to look all the time for those signs of hope. And again, I think Martin Luther King was right when he said that the arch of the moral universe is long. How long, O Lord? It's really long, long enough, too long. But he said, it bends towards justice. It bends towards justice. That is where hope is. So let me end by saying, this is how I learned growing hope in Palestine. How can you grow hope in this country for Palestine? And I would like to share quickly, not 3, but 4 things quickly, very quick with you. So what can we do to grow hope in Palestine? What can you do to grow hope in Palestine? Very quickly, the 4 P's, I call them. You can guess what the first P is? Prayers. We need your prayers because they keep us going. But prayers mean, when you pray, it means there is hope. You still hope for a change. So this is why we need you to keep praying. But secondly, second P is pilgrimages. We need you to come and see. Because once you come and see, you start understanding the conflict. You hear the story that you never ever will hear in American media. You will understand what the conflict is all about. So pilgrimages, come and see. And the third P is political advocacy. Whenever I go to the Hill here to meet with, I almost said whenever I go to hell, no, I'm to the Hill. Whenever I go to the Hill to meet with representatives there, people, members of Congress and so on, they keep telling me, you know what? your people, they come to us, or your friends, they come to us maybe twice a year, but the other group, they come every other week. So we need to go there every other week and to tell them, we would like to hear what are you doing about this point. And they need to hear from you, not from me, because you are their constituency. So that's hope. And last but not least, projects. We need churches, individuals to invest in Palestine at a time when people think it's not time for investment. I'm not talking only about companies, but I'm talking about churches supporting projects. You know, often when American groups come to the Holy Land, they do a tour through the West Bank, they get depressed. And I feel when they come to me, they are so depressed. Maybe because they feel, how come that we don't know this? How come that this story was not told in our media? But also, you know, when you look at the settlements, these are colonies, these are whole cities. They get depressed and they think, you know, we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so then they bring them to me to build them up. Because I always say, you know, we don't need depressed people. Depressed people cannot make difference. It's only hopeful people who can make difference in our world. And so I hope that each and every one of you can make difference in your life, in your communities, and in the world today. Thank you very much.
Yes, Arnie? We need both mics, so.
Okay, thanks. Couple questions. What's the attitude of the Palestinian government toward Christians in Palestine? And then second, I had a good friend who taught Arabic for the State Department, and she thought there was a disconnect between the Palestinian Arabs and the other Arab states.
Yeah, thank you. Let me start with the last one and go. I would say definitely there is a kind of disconnect between Palestine and the Arab states. For the simple reason that, you know, when we talk about the Arab world, it is as if it were a monolithic group of states, but it's not, because each state has its own. Look now, even just not to forget about Palestine, look at Qatar and Saudi Arabia, you know, neighbors, good allies until 2 years ago, and now, you know, they are like arch enemies. Even aeroplanes are not allowed to go into each other hemisphere. So, that's unfortunately, the Arab world is very complex, very diverse, with very conflicting interests, unfortunately. And often, you know, some of the Arab leaders were using always the Palestinian conflict just to keep their people somehow busy with Palestine, so that they will not care about civil rights and civil society and democracy and these kinds of things. The attitude of the Palestinian Authority towards Christians, I would say in general, it's very positive. Just to give you example, in average, in every Palestinian government cabinet, there are in average 2 Christian ministers. Right now, actually, 3 Christian ministers. The Minister of Finance is a Christian, very important post. The Minister of Economy, she is a Christian. The Minister of Tourism, she is a Christian. 3 out of 20, this is much higher than our percentage suggests. I was talking about Israel taxing churches. In Palestine, churches are exempt from taxes. I mean, just for you to see the difference, because again, this is something you don't hear here, you know. And I forgot the first question, but that was two. Okay, good.
Okay, someone else?
Thank you so much for what you've shared. Being an Episcopalian, I'm curious about the collaboration between you and Bishop Suhail over there, and I was glad to hear about the Holy Sepulchre action, but what other kinds of collaboration are going on?
Yeah, thank you. You know, since we are an Episcopalian church, let me also say that maybe what you don't know is that the Lutheran Church and the Episcopalian Church in Palestine, they started together as one church. Back in 1841, we were one church. And then the split came 1886, not for, dogmatic reasons, but you can imagine for political reasons, because in 1886, the situation of Germany was different. 1879, Bismarck united Germany. Until that moment, England was the empire per se and didn't need to share anything with the Germans. And suddenly the Germans were very strong, and this actually led to splitting the church. And they did it in their imperial way. They came together and they had a gentleman agreement. They said all the Protestant churches north of Jerusalem should become Episcopalian and all the churches south of Jerusalem Lutheran. Christmas Lutheran happened to be in Bethlehem, became Lutheran. So, I mean, you know, these are empires. This is why, you know, I love writing about empires, because, you know, it's... So, but I would say we have very strong ties together. And to be frank, the relationship between the two churches depends on the two bishops, if they like each other or not. But in general, we are very close.
Because you both have hospitals.
Correct, yeah, correct, yeah. The Episcopal Church in Gaza and in Nablus, the Lutheran Church in Jerusalem.
I'm curious about the situation of the Christian Arabs in Palestine and surrounding states. Is that number decreasing, and is there any hope in that situation?
The situation of Christians in the Arab world?
In Palestine and the Arab world.
In Palestine and the Arab world. Right, yeah. I mean, again, it doesn't look very good. I have a book coming out soon. My next book is going to be called The Rise and Fall of Christianity in the Middle East. And I look at the history of the Christian communities throughout the Middle East, 19th and 20th century. Just to give you an example, if you would have lived in that area, 1914, you would have thought that the best years for Christianity in the Middle East are yet to come. In Palestine at that time, 63% of all schools were Christian schools. Now, it's a totally different story. In Iraq, you know, Christian survived different dictatorship, but They didn't survive the American invasion in 2003. Over 1 million Iraqi Christians left Iraq after 2003. We'll not talk about Christians in Syria, same story, with all what's going on with ISIS and so on, it's tough. So if you look at all the countries in the region, the percentage of Christians is decreasing rapidly, not because of Islam, but because the whole political context. The only place which is maybe surprising where the percentage of Christians is growing is in the Gulf region, but these are expatriate Christians. These are Christians from the Philippines or from India or those countries that they come to work as guest workers in those countries. In Palestine, it's tough. I mean, if the Israeli occupation continues, I'm not sure that Christianity will be able to survive. This is unfortunately almost the case in Gaza. In Gaza today, there are less than 1,200 Christians left. We did a study a few years ago. We were able to count them one by one, which really means within this generation, Christianity will cease to exist in Gaza. So it's really tough. But it's not only tough for Christians. We did this study just 3 months ago about immigration. We asked 500 Christians and 500 Muslims about their intention to immigrate or not. 28% of the Christians said they would leave the area because of the political situation, because of the occupation, and because of the economic situation, lack of jobs and so on, if they had a chance. 28% of the Christians, 24% of the Muslims, almost the same. Yesterday I was here we were in Ames, and there was a young Palestinian Christian from Bethlehem, Muslim, and I was talking to her. She's on exchange program, and she said, she doesn't like to go back. As a young woman, once you experience here, you can move freely. There are no checkpoints. You can do what you want. So it doesn't look very, very positive. But this is why we are determined to stay there. I cannot anymore tell anyone don't immigrate. It's very tough. The only thing I can do is I can myself take that decision and stay, because I believe God wants us to be there and to be there now. Because this is where we belong, where we can make a difference. Yeah, again, my advice is not to react to them, but to say, actually, we stand together with many Jewish people and with many Muslim people and with many Christians from this country and from Palestine. We stand together. Working for the same thing, which is a just peace in that region, for a situation where Israel and Palestinians can live on equal footing, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews can live in peace, and where there is no oppression. That is actually our goal, and we do it with everyone who believe in these goals. And thanks God that, as I said, there are many Muslims, many Jews, and many Christians who share these goals with us. So it's not, if they say this or that, just don't give them that attention. Just have the right people with you, and just, keep telling the story. Keep telling the story. I think we have still 3 questions here that I see.
Hi, thank you. I wonder if youth and child detention is still a huge issue. Is it an escalating issue? Is it decreasing? What are you seeing right now with that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, children detention is still, unfortunately, in the increase. Maybe if you follow the Palestinian social media, you know that a young woman, a teenager, her name is Ahd al-Tamimi, a Palestinian Muslim, blonde hair, blue eyes, Palestinian woman, is now like the icon, because she was detained and she had the courage actually to slap the Israeli soldiers on his face, and she became like, the symbol of resistance. But her story is just to highlight. I don't have the exact number now of how many children detainees are there in Palestinian prisons, but there are enough. And in fact, I have to say that one of the courageous members of Congress in this country, from Minnesota, 4th District, McCollum is her name. She was able to get a petition to be signed by many members of Congress asking Israel to end the detention of Palestinian kids. Very, very courageous woman. So in fact, last week when I was on the Hill, I made, Beth and we made it a point to stop at her office just to thank her for that stand. Because again, we need to keep encouraging people that has that courage to speak truth to power. It always comes with a price tag, but they are able to tell the story. So.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Salvatore from Tanzania in East Africa. So I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of Iowa. So I have only one question. Of all the P's you have suggested, I don't see the importance of having inter-religious dialogue between Muslims and Christians in Palestine in order to see the new signs of hope in Palestine. Do you, by the way, hold interreligious dialogue in Palestine as also a means of seeing the signs of hope in Palestine? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. An important question. I belong actually to those who started interfaith dialogue back in the early 90s, Christian Muslim, but also Christian Jewish Muslim. Back at that time, that was, something unheard of at that time, and I was very much engaged with. I have to say, with the time, somehow I got bored a bit with that kind of interfaith dialogue, because we ended up with the same 7 pastors and the same 7 shaykhs and the same 7 rabbis, and we kept massaging each other religiously. It felt good, but I felt it, the spark was not really reaching the people that we want to reach. And so we changed a bit strategy. In fact, I said tomorrow I have a presentation to give at this global religious summit in Vienna. And my topic is actually, I will share about the first of its kind network of all Christian seminaries and Islamic Sharia colleges in the Arab world that we were able to launch last year. It was our initiative. Nobody thought that this will be possible, but there is now a network of all Christian seminaries and Muslim Sharia colleges in the Arab world. There are 18 of them right now members in this network, and our goal is to have 30 by 2020. And the idea is that we said, you know, it doesn't make sense to try somehow to convince people on the street of interfaith dialogue, because this is an endless story. But if we can actually work with all future pastors and all future sheikhs and imam in the seminaries and colleges where they are trained. And so what we are doing is we are developing a first of its kind joint curricula, a three credit hours curricula that all seminaries and all colleges will teach. We have created a fund for exchange, so that, because right now in most of these colleges, like in an Islamic college, it's a Muslim scholar teaching Christianity. And in a Christian seminary, it's a Christian theologian teaching Islam. We said, we have a fund, invite somebody to talk about his or her own religion. So we created funds for that, for student exchange. So this is now where I'm putting some of my energy. So it is important. I didn't mention it here because I felt it's a different maybe topic than the one I wanted to focus on. I think there is one last question, and I know I need to...
They're telling me you need to get to the airplane soon.
I need to get my plane, and so if I rush out, please don't think I don't want to talk to you, but...
And thank you very much for your comments, very interesting. And I wanted to comment, if I could, on the 4 Ps, one of which is pilgrimage. And I work with Friends of Sabeel, and I will be leading a trip at the end of June if anybody's interested in a pilgrimage. And we'll be spending some time in Bethlehem. We'll be seeing the work that Mitri does here. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody if you're interested in a pilgrimage to see the work of peace and justice that's happening.
We will end there. We thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.